This is Sergio Vega from Quicksand, and you're listening to The New Scene.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to The New Scene. I'm your host, Keith, and we're back with another brand new episode. And on the show this week, we've got Tristan Shone of Author and Punisher. And if you don't know Author and Punisher by now, you really should. Tristan has been doing his thing for a long time now, and he's got a really interesting story, and we cover all of it. His origins on the East Coast, moving out to the West Coast, leaving his job in engineering to pursue the arts and music, touring stadiums with Tool, the new gear he's working on. There's a lot here. It's a great conversation, and that's coming up shortly. But first, here's how you can support The New Scene. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at New Scene Pod. Shirts. We've got shirts for sale at Death Wish Inc. Short sleeve, long sleeve, logo tees, a custom designed shirt. You name it. Search The New Scene at Death Wish Inc. in the store. You'll see the fine selection of shirts. Pick one up. It's a great way to support the show. Reviews. Give us 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Also, you can write a review on Apple Podcasts, and if you write a nice review, I'll read it on the air. Also, you can catch me starting this week out with the Darling Fire. We're doing a week of shows in the Southeast with spotlights, and that tour kicks off June 9th in Miami. Head to New Scene Pod on Instagram or The Darling Fire on Instagram for more information. Also, don't forget to support Iodine Recordings. Jerome's Dream is on tour right now, and I just caught that tour last night in Brooklyn, and let me tell you, it's one of the best shows I've seen in a long time. So if you can catch one of those dates, make sure you do it. I'll talk about that show more at the end of the show, so make sure you stay tuned. For a full list of tour dates, head to Jerome's Dream Forever on Instagram. The Iron Roses and One Line Drawing are playing the Motor City Pride Festival in Detroit. The Iron Roses play on June 10th, and One Line Drawing plays on June 11th. For more information, check out motorcitypride.org. Audio Karate, a Show of Hands EP, is available now for pre-order, and the new single of the same name is available to stream now everywhere. Sign up for the Iodine email list. You'll find out about everything first. For more information, head to the Iodine Instagram at Iodine Recordings or to the Iodine website at iodinerecordings.com. Also, don't forget to support this month's sponsor, Death Wish Inc. Death Wish is running a contest on their Instagram to win tickets to New Friends Fest. Follow Death Wish Inc. and New Friends DIY on Instagram, then find the post on the Death Wish page, tag at least 2 friends, and you could win tickets to this excellent fest. Converge, Axe to Fall vinyl repress is up. Make sure you get your hands on that. Pre-order your copy today. Loma Prieta, Blast. It's coming out June 30th. Have you heard the singles, Glare and Circular Saw? I have. They're great. I think this is going to be easily one of the best releases of 2023. Can't wait to hear the rest of that record. For more information, head to the Death Wish Instagram at Death Wish Inc. or to the Death Wish website at deathwishinc.com. Okay. Check back in with me in segment 3. I'll talk about the Jerome's Dream gig that I attended. I'll tell you everything that's going on with me. But first, we are going to speak to Tristan Shone of Author and Punisher. Enjoy. All right, we are here now with Tristan Shone. Tristan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, Tristan, it's wonderful to have you here. You know, you've done a lot. You're doing a lot. You're on Relapse Records now. You put out an excellent record last year. You're touring the world. You've been playing stadium shows with Tool. You're doing it all. And you know what? We're going to cover all that stuff. But first, I need to ask you a question. How are you doing today?
Well, today I actually have, when you first get back from tour, you're sort of first in this euphoric state of I'm back, the weather's nice, I'm in San Diego, and and you're playing video games and hanging out with your family, and then very quickly, world starts to collapse on you, and that's where I'm at right now. So.
When you say the world collapses on you, is it just like what? Next tour coming up, emails?
Tell you the truth, my tour is I have a tour in June, but it's more I've got some projects coming up, building some gear, and on top of that, some family visits, some yard trauma, all sorts of like different things like that. So it's the balancing act, and I work as an engineer in a research facility, so it's the balancing act has gotten harder.
I see. Yeah, it can be really hard at times, working the day job, doing the music stuff, everything. It's a constant juggling act. And you have a family too? What's your family structure?
Oh, I say family. I'm married. I have a wife and I have a dog.
Oh.
And my family is on the East Coast, but it's like everybody's visiting next month, which is very exciting for me because I get to share a lot of things that I love about this town with them. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Now, when your family visits, do they stay with you?
Yeah.
Is that stressful for you?
No, it's great. I love it. We love hosting. I like making pizza. I like barbecuing and, showing my favorite restaurants. Now that we can go out to restaurants again, it's exciting. The last time my parents came, we were kind of like stuck at home, because of COVID.
Do you have a house?
Yeah, I have a house kind of near the SDSU, which is the state, actually the one that got to the final this year in basketball at university.
That sounds nice. Now, you mentioned video games. Now, this is a very important topic to me. What kind of games what games are you playing?
Well, I'm a late bloomer to the gaming world, maybe 6 years ago, but being a computer guy, my wife's a big gamer, and so she got me into, I think I started with Horizon, and then I like God of War, and then I moved on to Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring and Sekiro. I'm playing Elden Ring right now.
I just started Elden Ring. It's my first time ever playing a FromSoft game.
Ooh.
And I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm learning and I'm really enjoying it. And I know it's starting to take hold of me because I dreamed about the game the other night.
Yeah, it'll do that. I mean, it's such a dark game that I love the writers have such a dark humor. I always find it to just be like so sad and that it's funny, and those are the types of movies that I like too. So it's like, I just giggle the whole time I'm dying,
Yeah, it's a good vibe. Like I got trapped in some basement that you can't get out of, and there was an enemy that I had no chance of beating, so I lost all of my souls or grace or whatever it is that you carried around, and I just had to let it go.
Yeah. You just kind of have to let it go sometimes. I love the format. I love that this one's open world because you can sort of explore, and you're not like in this narrow pathway like a maze where you have to beat a boss or you're just totally effed. So I like that you can build up your strength and come back, and that's a change from some of the previous Souls games,
Yeah, I'm a pretty seasoned gamer, and I'm still getting used to that because even in Red Dead Redemption 2, like that's open, but there's also missions you have to complete, but you just open your map and it kind of tells you where to go and what to do. Elden Ring does not do that. It's just like, you just got to run somewhere and see if you're going to get killed or not.
I still don't know what the point of the game is. Like, we kind of do it as a couple. Like, my wife will sit, her name's Marilia, but she'll sit on the couch and like with her laptop, because she plays her own games, but she's more into like like Red Dead and oh god, why can't I think of it? GTA. And so this vibe is like she gets on her laptop and we're fully like researching how to do things. And so she's more like the navigator and I'm the pilot,
That sounds fun. I like that.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned you were building some machinery. This is something I wanted to ask about because obviously you have a very unique setup. And I was wondering if you ever get commissioned to build stuff, the type of instruments you use for others.
I've had offers before and, they weren't, I should say, it never really came to fruition. I've had a lot of people sort of reach out but recently working with an artist, Arca. She's a electronic musician who's had produced for Bjork in the past, and also like Kanye West and FK Twigs and some pretty big names. Like she's an amazing producer and performer. And so she rented, and I teched my instruments for her at some festivals last year. And so anyway, that got me on this path of for my company Drone Machines, which is basically a boutique company that we've started now based around my instruments, that is still hasn't really got up and running yet. We're still like in the prototyping phase of manufacturing and making the electronics. So yeah, I can't talk about some of it, but yeah, that's kind of where it's at. I'm building some new things for myself. I'm building some things that are custom for somebody, and then I'm building some a new set of things that I think will be useful for more of the electronic world. Controllers, but these are also synthesizers now. They make their own sound, so they're not just these input mechanisms.
So this artist you're working with used your actual stuff?
Yeah, like my old larger stuff at Primavera in Los Angeles, and then Portero, which was a festival at the port on the docks in San Francisco, like a big electronic music festival.
Is that weird at all when they use your stuff? Are you like, oh no, are they going to do like my thing?
Oh no, not at all. I mean, I get that question a lot, and I am just, for me, this is such an obvious direction for live electronic music to go in, that it's just inevitable that people are going to be using more tactile, controllers that are larger. So that's all I'm doing. I have my own aesthetic and sort of artistic input that I think is unique, but I basically just make stuff bigger.
That makes sense because, even if someone has the same equipment, it's not going to be you. Like if someone asks me about podcasting stuff, I tell them exactly what I use. It's not going to be me doing it.
Yeah, I really don't. I don't have any. I'm sure there would be some instance where I would get annoyed with the way someone might use something. But in general, I feel like if there's going to be more user interaction with electronic music, I think that's a good thing, because right now there's a lot of, and I have no problem with this, a lot of people pressing play and singing over it, and you saw Coachella live feed last week, and that's fine. These are amazing singers, performers. They do other stuff, and it's electronically produced music, so you're not going to replay that 100% live. And maybe with some hip hop, I've seen it done, and that's cool to have a live drummer and a live keyboardist, bass player. But some of this stuff is so glitchy and synthetic and created in, you can't create that live again. So that I understand. But there are ways to sort of interact with it that don't involve your fingers touching a little 1/2-inch diameter knob. There's things that I don't think that's a natural way for your body to move. I think if it's a little bit bigger, I think it will feel better for you. Like you're actually in a machine shop operating tools. And also from the audience perspective, I think it will be more entertaining for people.
It is, because something is lost when, all respect to any artist who does this, but just for me personally, if someone's just hitting play and kind of singing over stuff, it doesn't have the same feel as if they're actually operating things, whether it be the MIDI controllers and the machinery you're using, or turntables or instruments or something like that. So I really think that those elements add a lot to the performance.
Yeah, I think so too. And that's what we're trying to do. And I'm actually, I'm doing my best to not have that many more shows this year, because, which is tough at the end of an album cycle. You tend to get some bigger opportunities for festivals that may not have heard of you before. The touring starts to kind of trail off a little bit if you're headlining shows, because the album's not fresh anymore. But you start to get some opportunities with like festivals and things, and that's sort of I'm trying to say no to as much of it as I can, because I really want to focus on this gear thing. Also because I want to, the next time I go out for the next album, I want to have some fresh instrumentation to play with. So I'm really focusing on that this year.
That's good. I'm happy to hear that you're doing some manufacturing of this stuff now, Tristan. I had a whole vision, I was like, oh, he should have a company where he makes this stuff and maybe get into some like boutique guitar pedal stuff. And, it could be a whole thing. So it sounds like it's going in that direction.
Yeah, we have it set up right now. It's Drone Machines. You can go to Instagram and search for, I think it's _Drone Machines _. And then our website's dronemachines.com. But it's still sort of just a splash page for now because we're building the store up. And, with a lot of we have working prototypes that I'm using, and that we have an electronics person and a programmer and a synth guy and another mechanical engineer, all working, at night, around our other jobs. So time will tell if this can become a full-time job or if it's just going to sort of stay as a passion project.
You said you still work as an engineer?
Yeah, I work at UCSD, which is the other big university here. I live near SDSU and I work at UCSD, which is near the ocean, in La Jolla. And it's a microscopy lab, which is, I sort of do this. I do mechanical engineering, so I work on these big electron microscopes and with physicists and microbiologists, and they take data. It's a lot of biological specimens, like mice. We look. It's mostly like a brain research lab, like neuroscience. So we look at a lot of mice brains because they sort of, you can learn a lot about human brains from the mouse brain. It's a lot smaller.
How long have you been doing that gig? I know you got out of engineering and, got into performing a while ago. So when did you get back into this?
Well, yeah, that's sort of like something that's been going around. It was like part of the sort of, I don't know, the lore of Author and Punisher was that I left engineering, and which is true. I did in 2004. I applied to grad school for art, and I came to UCSD for art school. And that's when I started Author and Punisher, because I was in art school sort of like, oh, I have all this time now. I'm an artist making like robotic sculpture and stuff. And I made the drone machines. That was my first like time I built that stuff. But when I got out of there 3 years later, I sort of was faced with, okay, I can be a professor, because Author and Punisher, I can't make my living off of that yet. Still can't, to be honest. And then I could, I could work as maybe an adjunct professor. My art, I'm not like famous enough to be an art professor at a big university. So I'd have to work as like an adjunct professor, which is a nice job, but it doesn't make that much money. And I sort of had this opportunity to work in this lab as a mechanical engineer doing like automation, robotics. I just met these guys randomly on campus. I don't even remember how I met them. Yeah. There was an artist that I was working for who was doing a visualization of a mouse brain on a giant LCD wall, and she wanted some help with that. So she was looking for a grad student, and I reached out, and then I talked to the actual people who run the lab, and they're like, "Oh no, you're a mechanical engineer. We have other stuff for you to do." But what I realized was working in academia on tech was much more rewarding and less painful than working for a giant company in a tech park,
Yeah.
And the campus is beautiful. The hours are flexible. The people are interested in science. They're not trying to climb the ladder in the same way that they were in the private sector.
And you've been doing this type of stuff your whole life, right? Like even as a kid, you're building things, you're creating things, yes?
Yep. I was in something called Olympics or Odyssey of the Mind, which was a total nerd fest, but kind of mixed theater and engineering.
It mixed theater and engineering.
Yeah, you'd have to come up with like a play, but then at the same time, you'd have to it would be like 1 year it would be like ping pong balls or tennis balls, and you have to like move all these tennis balls from here to here without them touching the ground. Or this one, you'd have to shoot them through a hole. So you'd have all these like kind of, sort of techie problem solving tasks. One other one was paper airplanes, and so another one was bridge building. There was always like something, and we'd have like it'd be like the village people would be our theme or something. I mean, this was like from first grade through 12th grade for me.
And were you just always skilled in this area?
I liked gadgets. I wasn't like a super like programmer kind of nerd, although I did do some programming pretty early. My mom got me into like programming like Logo and early Apple IIc stuff. But I was more like into the electromechanical, like little motors operating. I made like little robotic cars and stuff like that. And then when I got into college at RPI, which is in Troy, New York, Rensselaer, I was like on the electric car team, and I actually met an artist there who was in the art program who was using tech and doing sort of like different robotic art installations. And he really changed the way I thought about engineering, because I was like, oh, I don't have to just build some like liquid delivery system for like, microscope slides or something, like, or just like some automation in telecom or semiconductor. Because to me, it was just like so boring.
Talk about your relationship with music. Did you get into like punk rock, hardcore, metal, all of it? What's your trajectory with that?
I grew up in a rural neighborhood, or a rural town near UNH in New Hampshire, which is sort of like, about 45 minutes from the coast. There's only like 12 miles of coastline in New Hampshire. So it's like, this is southeastern New Hampshire. And so there really wasn't much of like, it was very rural. The closest house was like, quarter mile from me, maybe, yeah, quarter mile from me. So I didn't have, like, I knew about all the hair metal bands. This was like in the 90, but I didn't, and Led Zeppelin, but I'd never even heard of Black Sabbath. Like my dad didn't listen to that. It's mostly like the 60s, Crosby, Stills and Nash and Young and stuff, which I love. But then when I got into high school, I had to go to another town because there was no high school in my town. So I started riding with other kids, and I met up with and I heard WUNH was playing. They had the Pit, which was like their Sunday night metal show, and I remember hearing that and hearing Sepultura, and that was like, it just caught me. Like nobody in my family listened to metal at all. It was just like I knew it. I was like, oh man, what's that? And I called the radio station, and then from then it was like Melvins, Fugazi, Helmet, all those bands, Ministry. Then I heard Godflesh. And then it was like from there, like Quicksand, Neurosis, His Hero's Gone, those types of bands, all that really like kind of dark apocalyptic stuff. Oh, no, Quicksand isn't like that, but
they're just universal. Like everybody likes them, or they should.
Oh, those two albums are just amazing.
So when did you start performing? When did you decide you wanted to do that?
Well, I was always playing piano in high school, and I had a band with some friends, and we kind of did some Cure covers and stuff. But then I started playing bass, and sort of had like there's this band called Godhead Silo that was like, and they were like a bass and drums band. I was always trying to do that, like a really heavy, simple. And then I got an Alesis SR16, which was a drum machine, maybe like 92, 91. And mid 93, 94. And I started programming and playing guitar with that. And that was really cool because I really liked Godflesh Selfless album. And so I was like writing these like drum beats. And that really, I had a band called Empathy Test there's a new band called Empathy Test, but this was a different one, with this guy, Sean McCumber, who was actually a writer for Decibel now and many other, but he and I had a band together. And then when I went to college at RPI, I had a band called Falkirk that kind of played with the hardcore bands there, like One King Down and Section 8. And I think we opened for Snapcase once because the Misfits were canceled. And then I went to Boston, had a band that never really went anywhere. And then there was Author and Punisher. So I had never really toured that much other than a couple Northeast shows.
And you were doing just like straight guitar and drums with Author and Punisher before it segued to all the machinery you use now, correct?
Yeah. Yep.
So talk about kind of developing into what it was now. Was there a moment, I know you were working as an engineer and you were kind of disillusioned with that because, well, the more corporate lifestyle is not the most fun. I know I did it for a very long time and I still do it, but I'm like fully remote now. So it's also like I'm not doing it, which is cool. But then you met this artist, right, who inspired you. And
just kind of showed you that you could kind of meld the two worlds?
He took me to, I think in 2000 or 2001, he took me as his assistant to Helsinki, Finland for this big art show. And he was a professor at RPI, and it was sort of a retro, like reel to reel, like early computer technology. It kind of looked like one of those server rooms that you'd see in the 60s in like Bell Labs or something. But it was kind of broken. So it sort of had this, so it was sort of commenting, and there were all these artists at this showcase, and there were all these robotic, installations, like little heads that would talk to you, and like these vines that would like move in this room that had sensors on them. I was just blew my mind. I'd never seen anything like it. I got introduced to all this stuff. And so, and there was also these DJs, and like everybody was like creative and wacky, and like we'd go out and like party, and it was just like, oh, this is what I want my life to be, In addition to I'd already been going to hardcore shows, and I loved that world too, but there was something lacking in that world that, I don't think I could just be a straight up musician, which is fine. I just, my mind wants to develop like stuff and wants to be more creative. And if it's just music, it doesn't do it. So yeah, that's where I decided to go back to UC. I started to apply to grad school, and I went back to UCSD, and that's where I, I had to sit in critiques with other artists and come up with ideas and hear what their opinions were. And I'm really glad I did it, because it made me more critical of art and think about it in ways other than just like, oh, that's cool, like, oh, it's a fire breathing dragon, that's cool. But no, you have to think about it like, in the context of what other people have done and why. I don't want to be pretentious, because I know a lot of people think that contemporary art is pretentious, and a lot of it is. But there are some pretty clever things in there that are based on literature and films, and anyway, so that was really good for me to go through that process.
When you went back to school and you're in the art school, did you have an idea of what you wanted to do in your mind, like something in art? Did you think you were going to focus on music? Did you know at that time?
No, I was actually just sort of playing, because I had brought the tracks for the Painted Army with me to San Diego from New Hampshire, and like mixed them out here. And I found a drummer in town, Bill Driscoll, and he sort of helped me finish the album. And so he was playing drums, I was playing guitar. We sort of like, I would like play in the courtyard of the art program and, try to perform in town a little bit. And I started doing shows at the Casbah as a 2-piece. And then I got a different guitar player and wrote my second EP called the second thing called War Cry in like 2005 or something. And right about then I had done these sort of like, I had all these sort of like visceral sculptural projects that I was making. And there was one where it would like it was like biometrics thing where it would like cut your finger, and then it would scan your finger every day. And then if it saw that your finger was still cut, it wouldn't cut it. But if it saw that it was healed, it would slice it again. I think I called that like peripheral pain or something. It was supposed to be like a little USB device that you would just, walk into the office and scan your thumb. It was just for sort of like a comment on, corporate life or something. So I was sort of doing these like, pound your head against the wall. And none of them were particularly good. And, some people in the critiques say, oh, it's all right. But for me, I'd have to show these in these group shows. I was like, I'm making this thing, and then I don't get to play with it. Like I make this complicated, like electromechanical thing that I'm proud of. It's engineered, and I machined all the parts and programmed it, but I don't get to play with it. And so when I came up with this idea to make this, I was building speakers. Oh yeah, sorry, that's what I forgot to mention. There was another artist in the program, Matt Hope, and he's a very influential artist for me and a good friend. And he was building like speakers, and he came from the UK, like these like sound system, reggae, dub, rave culture. And he helped me build some subwoofers. So I sold my guitar amp and speakers, and we built all our own stuff. And that was like a huge like turn for me to like, oh, I can build all this stuff. So I built a huge sound system with these subwoofers, and then I was like trying to play guitar with tapping it, and then playing the drums with my right hand, like pressing the buttons live. And it just sort of occurred to me. I was like, well, why don't I just make this like throttle that you could do, like, change the pitch with. And that's how it started.
So at that point, it's just you performing with the speakers that you're building and kind of trying to make something out of it.
Yeah, and sort of doing the guitar thing with the other guy. But after I sort of realized, I mean, part of it was like when I would show up with the band, it was one thing, it'd have some people. But when I showed up with this throttle with my own sound system, I was just like making these like ridiculous heavy drones with all this bass. People were, reacting to it. It was like, whoa, what's going on? So it was, in some ways, it was also more successful. And the guitar stuff, although now I wish I could still do that guitar drum machine stuff, but I'm kind of coming full circle again, and I'm sequencing some more stuff now and doing like a combination of like, I would say semi-automated. I have some sequences, I play live, I have a guitar player again,
Yeah. What kind of places are you playing, and what are the crowds like, and what's the reception like? Because, at that time, I'm guessing this is what, like early 2000s?
This was, no, I would say, yeah. Well, 2005.
Yeah, because at that time I was going into a lot of hardcore shows up until like 2003, and then I got really into post rock for a while. I still like it, but I was really close minded. It had to be a certain way. It had to be a full band. If a band had like a drum machine or something out of the ordinary, I was like, oh, that's no good. Or even if the band like didn't have their bass player that night, I'm like, oh, it's no good. Like, I was just like pretty close-minded about everything. But like, what type of places were you playing, and what was the reception like?
Well, a lot of it was art galleries, to be honest. The noise scene in San Diego, and there's a pretty storied noise and music scene in San Diego. Like Crash Worship was from here, and then you had like this group Sixes, which is Ryan Jenks, and I was doing some stuff with him, and then you all the Neurosis guys were up and down the coast, and so there was that sort of Tribes of Neurot thing. But I was doing more galleries because I came from art school, and so it was an easy thing for me to get. I could hop on these art shows where other people were showing their work, and there was like all sorts of performance art, and then I'd hop on there and do my drone metal, like sort of Sun-O thing, but my own version of it. And every time I'd create like a new piece of gear, I would just like incorporate it in the set. And then there was some garages. There was a guy, Sam Lopez. He's still around doing shows and called Stay Strange. I can't remember what it was called before, but he would do stuff in this. It was called the Smog Shop, and that was actually a smog shop. That was during the day, a shop, and then at night, I think it was one of the kids' dad's shop, and we would just go in there and roll the door up. Some stuff in TJ or Tijuana, and then up and down the coast. So like there was the terminal in Oakland. That's Ryan Jenks' space. I think he still has that, but he might be losing it. There were multiple spaces in Oakland. I can't remember. NIMBY might have been one of them. They're not there anymore because of the ghost ship thing, and also just the over gentrification of that whole area. But there was one called Rosaline up in Seattle. So a lot of stuff like that.
That sounds like a pretty cool scene, because like my familiarity is like stuff that everyone knows pretty much, hardcore scene, and I don't know, everything that branches out from that. And those scenes can be kind of close-minded in a lot of ways. There's good parts about them too as well, but it's like a pretty interesting area you're working in there.
Well, they started to, when I was first starting out, it was like that. And then it got to the point where, the sort of, as my music moved away from just being purely like ambient drone, and it was always heavy. When I started working into like, okay, now I'm going to put the drums in here with my right hand. I think that alienated some of the art people. Once it started to get into that point where it's like, oh, I'm starting to hear like some industrial vibes here. The sort of chin scratching, smoking, wine drinking art crowd, was like, oh, okay, this is too heavy for us. They like the gear, but they don't want to hear the music. So then I started moving more into the, the noise industrial scene and getting some shows with like some more clubs. Although to tell you the truth, like that didn't work out that well for me until maybe, like 2013 or 14. But I just toured. I just kept touring, I all around the West Coast. And, Doug's band, A Life Once Lost, took me on tour in 2012. And that was the first time anyone had really, like, another band had said, oh, why don't you come support us and go on this tour that's been set up by agents, I had been to Europe that time. I had gone organized my own tours over there and gone to Brazil because there was some art stuff. But I really wanted to break into the metal world,
Yeah.
and that was because I wanted to play venues, and so as much as I like the DIY scene, it can be a pain in the ass, and I'm very proud that I came from that world. But I wanted to break in, and so then Doug took me, and then of course, and then Phil Anselmo reached out, and that's where things opened up.
Yeah, I remembered. Wasn't Doug out with you during the Phil Anselmo stuff as well? I remember. I think you were on his label.
Yeah. He wrote to me and just said, "Hey, why don't I come do lights for you?" And I'll, and I needed. It was very helpful, man. He had toured so much more than me, and he knew the ropes.
I think that was right after A Life Once Lost broke up the last time, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I think, was I still living with him at that point? I can't remember. I might have just moved out. But yeah, I've known Doug since we're 16, so I'm happy to hear that it was Doug and A Life Once Lost that actually brought you out for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, well, I should say the first time. I should say like the first kind of national tour. I had been up and down the coast on the West Coast with some bands for little one-offs here and there. But I think oh yeah, I'm on a tour now with another band. Yeah. How
many years was it of just playing these shows and trying to figure things out until that tour in 2013? Like, how long were you doing it?
Since 2004.
Wow. Yep. That's a long time.
Yeah, because I was doing a lot of San Diego, like with drum machine, 2 guitar players, guitar player, drums. I did I think the furthest I went around was like Tucson, Santa Fe, Denver. Oh yeah, the Denver Rhinoceropolis in Denver. That was an awesome DIY spot. Santa Fe was High Mayhem Festival. Those were the noise guys out there.
Did it just naturally progress into more traditional songs? That's where the noise and ambient scene loses me a lot, because I'm a big just like typical song structure guy. I like good structure in songs. I like good songs of any type. I like some ambient stuff, but like a lot of it loses me. Like, how did you did it just naturally progress into more like songs as you're doing this?
Well, I was always doing it. It was more just like when I was playing the machines, I kind of had these two sides of what I was doing. I had the droney stuff that I would use with my machines, and then I would do the guitar stuff with the drum machine. I just called it, I was just doing like one at the art shows and one at my sort of metal shows. And then it just got to the point where I hate having multiple art projects. It's just multiple music projects. I would never do it. It's just a waste of time for me. I feel like you only have enough time to do one project properly, unless you're like loaded and you have. So I'm like, author and Punisher. So it was more just like I started to be able to play the drums live. Once I was able to do that, then I was like, oh, okay, I got rid of the other guy and I just started playing by myself.
Was your bandmate upset that you were doing it yourself now?
Well, I got rid of him before that point. Then I had gotten another guy to just play guitar, and then he actually quit. So it wasn't even like I got rid of those dudes. They just, we weren't doing well enough to sort of like warrant anyone staying. I think they would just like play with me for a little while because it was kind of fun. But my intention was always to make, I always wanted my music to be in the shadow, or not the shadow, in the same vein as the Melvin's Godflesh Neurosis stuff that I loved.
Oh yeah. There's I can definitely hear the Godflesh, and I'm a huge Jesu guy as well. So I like all that.
Yep, exactly. That's and I'm, now how many years later, almost 20 years later, it's like I feel so much more in control. I've learned so much, and I'm a late bloomer in the music kind of touring world. And yeah, I feel like I'm in a good spot. I feel in control of stuff now.
Yeah. I was inspired by your story even before I ever talked to you, because I was stuck in the corporate world. I was miserable. I was addicted to drugs, and I was just felt like I never could break into music or do it again, or that it was over. And I remember talking to someone about you, and they're like, yeah, he like worked on Wall Street and then he didn't like it. So now he just has these machines and he tours. And I was like, wow, like, God, I wish I could do something like that.
Yeah. I love I went to MIT, which is not true. And then it's funny.
Yeah. What are the other tales that are wrong?
I'll take it. I don't know. I don't know what they are, but they're.
Do you think you're the first person to do what you're doing in this form? Because I haven't heard of anything quite like this before. And I saw you for the first time when you played St. Vitus recently. And, you're really working it. Like, you've got the vocal thing and you're swinging that thing with your right arm to like hit the drum beats. It's, I've never seen anything like it before.
I do have an existential crisis sometimes because I sit up there and I'm like, people in the music world don't particularly love things that are different. They sort of, hardcore's popular again, for fuck's sake. I mean, and punk rock, it's like this 145 bullshit that I just never liked. That's my dog in the background, but
oh, that's okay.
It's for me, that's honestly, I'll be up on stage. Maybe I'm like hungover playing or something, and I'm just thinking and there's no one's like looking. No one's really like making any reaction. One of those shows that's like in France or something, and they're sleepy, and you're like, what the fuck am I doing? Like why keep doing? Like I don't know. Sometimes I get a little self-conscious because it is this guitar drum world, and then also even the DJ world is such a stylish thing. Like, people don't want to, they're just like, oh yeah, I want to use just Pioneer CDJs, like I don't want to use anything else because this is the cool thing. And you're like, no, that's not, it's, you can be more innovative. But am I the only person? Probably not, because people ask me if I want to patent this stuff. Oh, you should patent these because, I mean, no, you can't patent these. The idea of a MIDI controller has been around since like the 60s and 70s. Like, there's nothing novel about what I'm doing. I would say what's novel is that I'm playing this type of music live, and I'm doing electronic music in a live way.
I would say your particular setup is novel, right? Because I've never seen anyone with one of those arm swinging things to do the drum beat and the cool like Bane microphone that you have. I've never seen anyone exactly with that stuff.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think one thing that I try to. Yeah, I agree. There's probably some elements of that as sort of a style, but I also am trying to, in the same way like with art. Why I went to art school is it sort of taught me to sort of less is more in some ways. Like, I always, you could basically take this and sort of like if you were working on a movie, you always have to make these. It was when the age of Marvel and all these movies, like everything has to be grand gestures,
Yeah.
And so I do have a lot of people in sort of the cosplay industrial fan base. They want you to take this shit as far as it will go, and they want you to be RoboCop on stage. And for me, I always come back to the idea of I try to block that out because, yeah, sure, I could probably be more popular if I was totally ridiculous all the time.
Yeah, think about it. If you got up with like a whole like industrial steampunk setup and you had like cables running through you and a gas mask on,
yeah,
and like a big light show and fog and weird stuff on stage, it could be like this whole thing. But I feel like, I don't know, I feel like that stuff has like somewhat of a short shelf life.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not that practical. And when I was on tour with Tool and there, I wouldn't even say on tour with Tool, on many tours and at many shows, I've had this tendency in the past to just go way overboard. With, I've got 2 sound cards with 2 computers. I've got like 2 different microphones, all my masks set up on like this other swinging arm that would come over, and then all my entire sound system. So I have like 6 subwoofers and, all running through a custom rack that I made that's like got like wires falling out. And, you're trying to set this up, and I don't have any money, so I'm doing it like by myself with no staff. Kind of like, Captured by Robots. He travels by himself, and you're just like, what the fuck are you doing, you maniac? And so it's like that, the stress of that, like that's what's happened to me. It's like, I don't do that anymore. On the Tool trip, I could, because I could hire some people. I had 5 other people with me to help me. And I wanted, Danny and Justin wanted me, or Adam wanted me to be on that tour. I'm like, I'm going to show them everything I have. But if I got a big tour like that, I don't think I would do that again because I don't think it makes the performance better. I definitely don't play better when I have more gear on stage. I play much better when I have a much simpler setup. And it's frustrating for some fans, like in Europe, especially Europe, because they're very open and they speak their minds without any tact. Like the Germans will come up and be like, it is very disappointing that you, I'm doing a French accent. But,
I heard that from another guest recently, that the Germans are very direct with their critiques.
yeah, you know, it's not just the Germans. I would say it's most Europeans. They're kind of like, oh, you don't, yeah, you really, you didn't bring much stuff. It's your performance is much less exciting than it used to be. But great job.
Oh.
But great job, you know. And you're just like thinking to yourself, like I'm thinking to myself in my mind, I'm like, thank God that I only have this amount of stuff because I'm able to like I can in my mind I can deal with it, you know. And
Yeah.
technically it never fails. And like yes, I have more stuff. I could bring it, but anyway, I'm at a comfortable place with myself there, you know, like I don't bring 4 things that I don't need just to have them on stage.
Yeah, because for that Tool tour, you brought like all of your biggest stuff, right?
Yep.
I mean, that tour's in stadiums.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I did for the first 12 shows, which were in the US, and then they asked me to go to Australia with them. And I had to like on the fly decide because the shows, I think we had like a week off and then everything got shipped to Australia. And so I had to decide like, you know, I can't afford to bring the crew there. So I guess we'll just take my small setup, which is what I was normally touring with. So anyway, and then when I did the shows in Australia, we did 8 more. And honestly, it was like, I didn't bring the light package either that I had rented. And it was, in my mind, those shows were a lot more enjoyable for me because I could really like, I wasn't worried about, okay, now I got to move this thing and then I got to go over here. And it was just so stressful. And now I was just much more fluid. Like that's how it's designed. My setup is designed to be like, there's something in your left hand that moves between things easily. And then the right hand is just sort of subconsciously like moving through the beats. And my feet have these pedals. And so like, it was exactly the amount of gear that I needed. And that's what when I'm touring with Doug now, it's like, we have such a nice amount of stuff. I'm very like comfortable with it.
How was the reception to you at those Tool shows?
It was better than I thought it was going to be. I mean, I know a lot of people who've toured with them. So I, you know, picked some of their brains. Like I know Yob and Dalek, Big Business. And I've crossed paths with all of them. So I, you know, asked some questions of Three Teeth, who I know well from LA. And so they had said, yeah, you're going to get heckled a little bit. And that did happen a little bit, but for the most part, people were pretty interested. And I got a lot of like thank yous on Instagram and people, I'd walk out in the audience and sort of watch Tool every night and people come up and say nice things. I really, they were a much, I don't know, for a pop metal audience, they were very nice. I never had an issue with anybody.
Yeah, you know, Tool fans are peculiar. Like you see the memes sometimes and they're just insane about Tool and know everything about Tool. But I feel like they're pretty cool. Like they'd be pretty open-minded, especially to you, because I don't know. I've never heard anybody say anything bad about you because like the music is good. The setup is really unique. Like it's a very unique thing. So I just, you know, I think at least from my end, everything I hear is always positive, which is good.
Yeah, they were cool. I mean, Tool always brings, you know, I think they have a pretty diverse group of bands they've taken out, you know, from ISIS to Mastodon to Meshuggah. And those I guess are like the sort of more popular ones, but you know, like yeah, Dalek, like aggressive rap, you know, noisy rap, and then you got like, so it's just yeah, Nyob, obviously, all these bands, and they don't draw enough people to be a support on a big thing like that, and so it was really cool that Tool brings those bands around. It's an amazing opportunity that I'm sure everyone of the bands, including myself, was just like so thankful to have. It was just an absolutely life-changing experience.
I like that. So, I mean, you've done, I know that you have Doug out with you now and you've gone out with people before, but you've also done a lot of touring by yourself, yes?
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, on the last shows with Tool in the US there, I was by myself when we came back from Australia. I just said, you know, fuck it. I'm just going to drive myself. So I slept in the parking lot of the arena in my van.
Do you like that? I got to say, like, I've toured with bands, but like as a merch guy,
yeah,
I'm going to be touring for the first time in a band soon. But the idea of being out by myself sounds very appealing. because I'm a pretty solitary guy, you know? Like I'm okay being around people too, but the idea of being able to tour by myself sounds very appealing. Do you like it?
Yeah, I mean, I love it. I don't like staying at people's houses for the most part because it actually, you got to deal with their cats and their kids, and then they always want to make you breakfast in the morning, and I
Yeah.
don't want to have breakfast. I just want to go have coffee and get in the road, and it's nice to sort of exist. You can get a little camping stove, and I'm just going to stop here and go see this thing. Listen to books because in the band everybody likes to listen to some loud metal, and I like to listen to books.
Yeah, I like to listen to Howard Stern or podcasts or that type of thing. I don't listen to as much music as I used to all the time.
Yeah, or on the road. I always listen to reggae too. I like a lot of dub and electronic music that a lot of people that I tour with don't particularly like.
Yeah, it's good to, when you're on a long trip, it's good to put on something that you don't really have to think about or fiddle with. Like I like those lo-fi hip hop beat stations.
Yeah.
I like all that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, I think you're gonna love it. I mean, depending if you're sleeping in the van or you're gonna get a hotel room, or it's really, especially in Europe, my sort of relationship to touring. And Doug is a very we're very independent, so we know when each other needs time. He knows people all over the place, so a lot of times he'll just go his way and I'll go my way, and then when we want to hang out, we'll hang out. Never have problems with each other, and we sort of have it so he deals with the merch, at least for now, and I'm dealing with the gear. So we have our own jobs, and but I'm hanging out less and less at the venues. I try to go hiking or go have a nice meal and just kind of show up near the set, just so I don't get burned out on shitty venue backstages and shit like that.
Yeah, that I want to be in the mindset before I go on stage. Plus, I used to be a wild alcohol and drug addict, so I don't necessarily want to be around a lot of drinking or weed smoke or anything like that. I just want to be sequestered somewhere until it's time to play.
Yeah, exactly. And it's tough because you want to be that social interaction is a huge part of what I love about but there's also the punishment about gear that happens with me, and that can be for every night for 20 days in a row. It starts to wear on me, and then I get I'm starting to I don't want to talk about this anymore. Yeah, there's so many things like that after 20 years of doing this, I'm kind of okay, now I know what I need to do to get in the right mindset to put that performance on.
How did you decide to incorporate Doug for live guitar? When did that start happening?
Well, it was actually when I was, pandemic, got back, last 3 shows of Tool were canceled, and I drove straight home from Portland, Oregon to San Diego, and then, for about a month, just sort of processed, the pandemic and that tour. It was crazy time. Be on this crazy tour and then have to go home to a world pandemic that lasted for 2 years and is still sort of happening. But I started writing the album. I set all my stuff up in the studio, started writing the album. And I think after 6 months, I sort of had some good songs together, and I was doing that Portishead cover. And I asked my manager at the time, Phil Scrosso, who plays guitar in As I Lay Dying, is a San Diego guy, and he was on the Tool trip with me, doing lights for half of it and managing. And he and I have been good friends for a while. And I said, "Hey, could you play do the lead for Portishead?" And then he played it. And then I said, "Well, there might be some other spots that maybe you could add some stuff." And basically, because it was the pandemic, I caught Phil. He just wrote guitar for the whole entire album in about a month. And he sent me a bunch of tracks, and I was sort of suspect of this isn't going to work out, because I was I don't need it. I've already got it's already heavy. I already have melodies, but man, I was just kind of blown away. It really worked. It was it added, it was just me being a little naive, really. It was amazing. I love it. I had to, I didn't use all of it, but I used most of the material he gave me, and I mixed it in.
For the live setup, what happens? Do you send the tracks to Doug and he just kind of replicates what's happening, or how deep does it go?
Yeah, so basically what happened there was, Phil couldn't tour with me, and I knew that. I knew that was going to happen. I was like, fuck. So I'll just sequence the guitars. And then I was like, nah, you can't sequence a guitar lead, because I try to minimize the amount of stuff that I sequence. I have like some rhythmic stuff that, is, or like a sample, or like some rhythmic stuff like, or like, like that stuff I was saying that an electronic person produces in the studio. That's like, you can't really play that live because it's like textures or it's an arpeggiator. So that kind of stuff I sequence. But I play the main drums, the bass, I sing it live, and I play some of the higher synths when I have an extra hand. So the guitars, I was like, no, we can't sequence this. So Phil and I were like coming up with some people, and I needed it to be somebody that I liked, like to bro down with. And I also needed them to be kind of a shredder, because some of the riffs are a little bit like do 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 do, these kind of like arpeggiated, and then there's some leads. And I immediately thought of Doug, and I wrote to him, and there was really no discussion. He flew out, a few months later, and we prepped for it and drank some beers, and it was great. But yeah, I think he and Phil like discussed it, and like he had to switch to. Phil wrote it on an 8-string Ibanez or something, and then Doug's got a Framus 7-string, so he was able to do most of what Phil was doing.
Yeah, and Doug, I think, would be one of the best people to be out on the road with. I mean, I lived with him for years. I've known him for years. Just a solid all around.
He's a road dog, man. He's over there. He just got in there yesterday for Ecstatic Vision. He's going to be there for 6 weeks, and then he has no days off. His last show is June 6th in Utrecht, Netherlands, and then I think we pick him up. Oh no, we're actually renting their van. So then I get in on the 7th, and we go play Liège, Belgium that night. So he has no days off. He's pretty much going to be playing shows straight for 9 weeks.
Well, he's been doing this pretty much nonstop since he's 16.
I know. I'm a little worried about him on this tour, to be honest, because it's like, he's probably going to be like, oh man, I'm taking it easy on the drinking right now. He won't be having as many beers when I see him.
Doug, check in and let us know how you're doing, huh? We want to make sure you're okay.
Yeah. I'll check in on him, and I'll give him a week because I'm sure they're having a lot of fun right now.
When you record the records, how does that work? Do you have your stuff in the studio? Like, what's the deal?
I just do it for the most part. I've done it multiple ways. When I recorded every single album I've done, I usually just like play them in my studio, and I record them. I record the MIDI to my session on Ableton, and then I take that into the studio and reamp the stuff, out. So I'll run it through other speakers, and then some of the synths I'll run through some like nice, a lot of software synths, but then also like some Electron Analog 4 synths I'll run through like some Shadow Hills preamps and things like that, and layer the stuff up like I do live. So you get a little bit of the analog and like a little of the speaker and a little bit of the sub bass all mixed together. The drums are all just samples that I create. And then we do like the last album, John Coda, who's like my sound engineer, he played some drums that I like kind of chopped up. Danny from Tool played some drums. So this last album, I had people sending me stuff and then incorporating it. But the only time I did it live was with Phil Anselmo at his house. When I went to record with him, he had his own team of guys, and they wouldn't let me play to a click track, and he wouldn't let me edit anything. Like I was not allowed to sit down at the Pro Tools desk. So like he had his dudes do it, which was cool, but it was also like, dude, I'm playing electronic music. Like, you can go in and like slide this stuff around a little bit, and you can also like add synths later. And they just, he had his own way of doing it, which was cool. I'm glad I did it for that album, but I'd never do it again.
Why couldn't you be involved with it? Why could it had to be their way?
Well, he was a producer on it with me, but mainly it was him, and he was like conducting, he'd be sitting in there with his arms and like with his little conductor cigarette and like, just like, we would just start drinking beers and just like play this stuff, and he wanted it to be live, like, which I respect. But if you listen to that album, Melk En Honing, like my tempo is like all over the place, except for a couple songs that actually had like a sample loop, like young, like the song "The Barge," "Shame." But if you listen to like "Future Man," like that song, which is like one of my favorite tracks, but I don't play it live. It's like, I mean, it probably shifts like 15 BPM accidentally throughout the whole song. It's ridiculous.
He insisted on no click track.
Yeah. I think I snuck in there. So like there were a couple times when like they wouldn't listen to me. Like I wanted something. I was there for like 3 weeks, and I just stayed up in this like bedroom in like a pile of blankets. And I snuck into the Pro Tools desk one night and like made some changes, and they never found out about it.
That seems weird that like you were just not allowed to, have a click track or make any changes.
Yeah, I mean, I probably could have fought him on it, to be honest, but it's not a terrible idea, and he's a really good musician and a really amazing producer, and that guy is focused, and I was really impressed, and it was great working with him. So I respected him, and I was like, yeah, let's do this. Let's make a live industrial album. Let's do this. Like, I mean, obviously we tracked the vocals like second, but and we added some middle, some things, but every like bass tone and right-handed drum thing was all played live. Maybe we punched in, but there was no like sliding the notes around or anything like that.
You're on Relapse Records now. That's got to be great, right?
They're great. Yeah. I'm really psyched. I'm hoping to do. We completed our 2 albums, so now I think we're going to be moving on to, hopefully, fingers crossed. We haven't really talked about it, but I'm hoping that we can just do more.
Did you see a bump after Relapse? I mean, they're a pretty legendary label.
Yeah, for sure. I've been around for a long time, so I'm not getting that. Like, I remember when I saw a huge bump when I was like, what was the name of that? I can't fucking remember. When I did Terror Bird on Ursus Americanus, those 2 albums, Ursus Americanus and Women and Children, when I did those, because Terror Bird was the most popular song I've ever had, there was a big, huge bump there. It was like, what's this stuff, Since then, people have gotten used to it, so it's a little harder I saw a good bump. I'm doing better with my turnouts now, so like getting much better like support tours and things like that. But it's still like, if you look at the history, it's just pretty steady rise. There's been no like defining moment. Even Tool, like Tool was a good bump, but it's not like you're selling out your catalog, your back catalog and your catalog because you're out on tour with Tool. It doesn't happen that way.
I mean, steady rise, that's good, right? Better than drop off.
Right, exactly. If the Fire Breathing Dragon, RoboCop, you'd have a big jump, but I would also not be true to like, I'm still trying to just play live electronic music with devices that are carefully designed, but not like, they're not fake steampunk shells. They're actual things that control sound, and
yeah,
I don't want to overdo it. I can still travel in 3 Pelican cases.
That's good.
Yeah.
You need to be true to who you are too. Like if you were a theatrics guy and really into steampunk and like weird fashion, like, okay, but I met you at that St. Vitus show with Doug and you just seem like a pretty nice, normal guy. So, I mean, you got to be true to who you are.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And that's the way I feel. And I wouldn't be, although I'm excited. I love the fashion world, especially. Like, man, that's like a world where they spend a lot of money to make some ridiculous, like theatrical, but also like beautiful, visceral aesthetic, kind of like machinery mixed in with fashion. Like, that's a really cool world. And I someday it might be fun to make some stuff for that, but there are limits to what I'll do. Like, am I just designing a sculpture here, or am I making an instrument,
Yeah. Have you tapped into that world at all? Or I could see you at like a Saint Laurent weird fashion show, making some noise or doing like some kind of soundtrack for something. Have you gotten any offers like that?
No, I think some songs have been used on the runway and like certain things, but No, not really. And in the soundtracking world, I've had some opportunities and done some, like, a lot of times they'll just put feelers out. Because Health, who I toured with recently, has done a lot of that and a lot of video game work. And like they did Max Payne, and they've done some movie scoring, and they're really good at it. It's not my favorite thing to do movie scoring, and I that's why, like, if I had to think about it, like, I'm more of a gear person, so I'm more interested in the gear side. I'm not going to say no to other stuff, but I like being in the studio, but I'd much rather be like designing and making like machinery.
No, that makes sense. Like I get offers sometimes. They're like, "Hey, do you want to go to this show? Do you want to cover this show? Do you, you know?" And I'm like, "No." Like, honestly, I don't really like going to shows that much anymore. I just want to sit home in front of my gear and talk to people like yourself, and then chop it up and then put it out there.
Yeah, you have to. Something about getting old, you sort of. I think it's just you sort of running out of time and running out of patience that you stop saying yes to everything, and you sort of have to. Okay, my road is narrowing here.
Yeah. How old are you now?
I'm 45.
Yeah, you're 45. If I'm you, I want to be home side by side with my wife playing video games, you know?
Well, half
That's the dream right there.
Yeah, sometimes it is. And actually, I have to go down and I'm doing a collab track with someone I'm probably not supposed to mention yet, and I got to do vocals on it. And last night I was decided I was going to work on my van and play Elden Ring, and and tonight I'm like, I could easily do the same thing, but he's probably going to send me an email tomorrow wondering where the files are. That's how it goes.
During the initial rise of Author and Punisher, I remember a period where everybody was discovering you, and there's little documentaries about the gear and all that stuff. That had to feel good, right? Because, I mean, you've been working on this thing for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, those I haven't done them as much lately because I feel like we kind of beat it into the ground a little bit. But when I build some new stuff, it doesn't take much to get like, hey, I built some new stuff. You want to cover it? And then you can get somebody to come out, but yeah, it felt good. Like Red Bull, I did one at the Moog Fest, which was kind of probably my most informative one. And like Noisy has been great. Make Magazine, Wired Magazine. Yeah, totally. I mean, for me, it was funny because that world was cool, but they weren't. It still was that thing where I wanted to break into the metal world. I wanted to be recognized in metal magazines. I was like, I'm playing metal, and it's doom metal, and it stands up with other doom metal and other industrial music. But I'm not getting coverage in those magazines, and so it was cool, but it was cooler it's always cooler, even though if it's, to get a piece in Decibel or Revolver.
Yeah, that's where it's at for sure. No, I know the feeling because there was so many years where I wasn't doing anything because I was just in bad shape. And now, I'm 41 years old and I'm doing things and things are starting to pop off. It's like a dream come true because years ago I'm sitting in my basement apartment alone, high. I'm like, I'm too old. Nothing's going to happen. Music is over. I blew it. But it's never too late. It's never too late to turn everything around.
Yeah, it was just coming from different points. And, I think it's always been this thing to like, I wanted to get, it's just, I guess it's for my own, ego or whatever, just to be recognized by the metal world in that sense. But it's also like to get the metal world to sort of like loosen up a little bit about it. It's like, oh yeah, it's fucking Slayer. Like even when I was playing for Phil Anselmo, opening for him, like people were yelling Slayer. And I'm just like, I was like, what the fuck is wrong with these morons? Or they would either yell Slayer or Skrillex because they were calling me Skrillex, but they wanted to hear Slayer. But it was like, you're not even hearing Slayer. You're going to hear Pantera covers. Like, what the fuck?
I think it's just muscle memory for metal people to yell Slayer.
Yeah, it was. And the thing was, I was never a fan of like the mainstream metal like that. So it was always just kind of bonehead to me. But I think like that world is now, well, there was a time when every metal band had like a noise guy. And then there was one like back in the 90s with like a DJ. And then now you've got, you've got all the metal bands basically sequencing their entire setup and playing along with it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's all these kind of weird tech things that they're doing, but they're still playing guitar, drums, bass, and so there's like no, I mean, it is opening up to a certain degree, but
It is. I was talking to a band recently, and they said they don't even need to bring amplifiers anymore. They're doing whatever it is you're talking about. And I'm like, really? I had no idea.
well, Doug just plugs into my setup. Our amp blew on the first European tour I did with him, and like the second show, because the stuff had sat for like 2 years, and so like a lot of these amps, like when they first got out, they were like, I don't know what we blew. So I was like, fuck. So like for 2 shows, we had this awkward thing plugging into the PA until I could program it on my laptop. So he basically plays through my rig, and we use a neural DSP, like Gojira's sort of, sounding plugin. So he doesn't have any amps, so we don't have any speakers on stage.
I love that. You could make up some whole story like Doug shredding on the guitar is powering you, and you're playing all the machines. It could be like a whole lore thing.
Well, he loves it because he doesn't have to we don't have to carry as much stuff now, but
yeah, carrying all that stuff must be a pain, right? By the way, like you ever see all the memes like, oh, the singer never carries any gear? You're single-handedly turning that stereotype around.
Exactly. Well, it's like there was a meme that came out. I think it was one of the guys from Full of Hell like posted it or something. But did you play that game Death Stranding?
No, it looked too out there for me.
Oh, it was so good, especially because I'm big into my van, I'm big into gear, and I'm also like really into cases. Like I have like a Pelican case for every single piece of equipment that I have. And it's essentially like when I show up to a show, there's like I got 3 Pelican cases, but then I've got the one for my microphone, and then the thing for this, and then Doug's got his, and then my lights. So there's really probably like 10, and they're all stacked in this way. And it's just, somebody said like, oh, this is Author and Punisher just out on tour, and there's a picture of the guy from Death Stranding with all these cases attached to his body, with his van, riding through these like desolate landscapes. I loved that game. I was like, it was like Pelican case logistics across a post-apocalypse.
People said the game was just like, oh, it's just like you carrying packages places, and I was like, that doesn't sound too fun.
It sounded like being on tour, to be honest. I kind of liked it. I loved just sort of taking care of it all. And then I think part of like the band that I really like, although I do have managers now, is like I like that logistical. I like the logistical part of it. I like the DIY nature of like I loved figuring Europe out. Like a lot of times, you talk to these European agents and drivers, and you get to know all these people over there, and it's different over there. You got to do staying in hotels. The highways are different. You got to pay tolls. You got to do the ferries. There's different rules, but for me, it was like, and so you're paying all these people over there to do it. I'm like, no, I can figure this out. So we just drive ourselves over there now. We get our own hotels, and, you sort of get to, if you're just a passenger in the back of some van, you don't get to really experience. And as an American, I think we drive places, So I was like, I'm just going to drive. And then, we've gotten into some trouble before, but I love that. I love figuring out that whole process. I don't know that I would want to do it in Asia or South America, but it was cool there.
Yeah, that just sounds scary to me. Imagine being you don't have to imagine, but like you're in a country, you don't know the language, you don't know the roads, you can't read the signs, like, geez.
Well, yeah, and also just there's some of those places, there's going in between areas, it gets pretty rural, and there's not as much money in some of those places, so it's not safe. And you're driving a Sprinter van full of a bunch of like a Universal Audio sound card that's worth $3,000, and those with your merch cash, it's just a little sketchy.
Does someone sleep in the van? I know Ecstatic Vision, like someone would always sleep in the van to prevent a theft.
I've actually renovated my van now, so I've got like a little kitchen in there and a bed. And I did sleep on this last one. We just did 3 shows in the West Coast. It was the maiden voyage for that setup, and there were 3 of us, and Doug and John slept in the hotel room, and I slept in the van. But it was great. I got beers in there. It was very comfortable. Fan.
Yeah, like I want to volunteer. When I'm doing my touring, if there's a van involved, I want to volunteer to sleep in the van because it would be like my own little apartment. I can sit in there, I can watch Twitch, I can listen to a podcast. It'll be fine.
Yeah, if you can get it to be comfortable, as long as it's not the bench seat. And I don't. Some of these metal vans, man, they're just a goddamn disaster.
Yeah.
I can't do that. I got what do you call it? Standards.
Yeah, no, I hear you on that. I've realized I can be a bit germophobic, especially when I'm traveling.
I think Doug thinks I'm bougie, but that's, I'm proud of that at this point.
So you're working on new machines. How long have you been working with the stuff you have now, and what's going to be the change with the new stuff you're working on?
Well, it's been sort of I built the right hand controller that I have now. I built in 2009, but the microphone I built this summer. The left hand, I built this thing called Mini Rack. It's like these two sliding keys. I built that in 2018. So, and I had built a new right hand controller called Gridiron in 2018 as well. And I toured one tour with it in Europe, and I kind of beat the shit out of it. It's thrashed. And I was like, okay, this is a failure, which happens sometimes. You just make things don't work. And also you couldn't really see, it was an XY rather than just a back and forth. So it had this little stylus that would go on these little grooves so I went back to the original one, which I still use, and it's never broken on me, knock on wood. So that one, to tell you the truth, I'm not sure I don't have plans to remake that one yet. I have ideas, but for the most part, these are these sort of controllers that are sliding, spinning, throttles, things like that. Some of them are 19 inches that fit into a rack. Like the three products we're making for our company are this two sliding keys that fit into a 19-inch rack. This sort of thing I call the ingot, which is like a disc that's not flat but vertical, and it slides along a rail, and it also spins. So you can kind of like roll your hand on it. I don't know if you've seen like a lathe, so it kind of spins in that way. And then the other one is just these knobs that'll be made out of either concrete, granite, raw steel, or wood. And those are all sound making devices. You can plug them into your modular rig. So like you can, a lot of these people that have these like crazy synthesizer setups at home now, you can plug it into your guitar pedals. So these are supposed to be like if you look at my setup when I'm playing live, there's a thing in front of me that looks like it's got metal sides, and I usually have two keyboards in there, like a box with a bunch of knobs, and then I have some devices on it. And that's kind of like, we're going to sell something like that, where it's this custom rack where you can reconfigure to have like some knobs, one of these other sliders. You could put an electron synthesizer in there. So it's sort of like allows you to interface either with your computer or anything you want. And it's got custom electronics that we're making with this microcontroller called the Daisy, which is in a lot of electronic music instruments now, which is an open source device that you can program. So like there'll be an online portal where people can share the code that they're using. Like, oh, hey, I made a cool sound, or I've used my device this way, and then you just download the code onto your device and use it.
That's pretty fascinating stuff. You're like a man on an island. I mean, if you need to ask questions, where do you go? I guess you would just ask other engineers or something, right?
Well, the company that's helping us with the electronics is pretty skilled in this. They make it's a computer chip essentially. It's called the Daisy. There used to be one. You've probably heard of Arduino.
No,
that's an Italian one. That's like that I use on all my current gear. It's just like a little. You upload your code to it, and has a USB plug, and you can output MIDI that goes right to my laptop, or you can plug it directly into a synthesizer or a drum machine. And so there's a lot of people, there's a community doing it, but we're trying to make it so that like you can buy our device, but it's actually like it is, endlessly reconfigurable. You can buy each part. Oh yeah, the cable broke, where you can buy the cable assembly. So there's none of this bullshit where you got to like, oh, the thing's broken, you can buy all the parts online. And the thing that we're trying to break into now is sort of the DJ world is that's sort of like what I'm fast tracking right now, is sort of this sort of interfacing with DJ gear, so that we're getting them out of the knob twiddling into the large knob twiddling.
Yeah, I think there's great potential there. I can imagine a DJ using like that arm pump drum thing that you use and all the different MIDI controllers. And now I'm envisioning like some industrial DJ music that's really heavy. There's all kinds of stuff that could be done.
The problem with the arm pump is that the problem is when you slam something like that, you basically knock the table over every time you do it. And it's not even a joke. Like it's a deal breaker in a lot of ways, because I have to basically make this U-shaped. I have these 3 tables that go around me, and they're all bolted together. They're all like with like leveling on all the feet, and that was the only way I could do it. So I play this thing and it doesn't slide across the stage. So that's why that one is something we're not really making to sell, because people will try to like attach it to something and they'll just knock over whatever they're using.
Yeah.
It's a real problem, because I can tell you, because for many years I was like using sawhorses. Like I'd be in tour in the UK, and like you find out that nobody's tables were solid enough for you to bolt to. So my wife and I'd be like driving in the middle of like Bradford or some random city to like some manufacturer of sawhorses, but it's like a different word for it. Or I think it was like Stahl. I can't remember the name for it in Germany, but like in every country, I know what the sawhorse is in that language, because trying to bolt it to it, because you need something strong. And it was a real hassle and embarrassing.
Have you ever had a catastrophe live where you just, I mean, because you have a pretty unique setup. It's not like, oh, just run out and get a cable and fix this. Like, have you ever had a catastrophe that you couldn't get around in your live show?
Yeah, many times, many times. I had, well, actually, funny to say, the last Tool show I did, right before like when basically that night they told us that the tour was pretty much over. We all got pretty drunk and probably gave each other COVID, but it was like my computer, one of my devices, like the wire had gotten frayed and I didn't notice, and it was connecting and reconnecting the power like very fast, and my computer eventually just like the software just like went into that kind of digital sound land where it goes over like the Matrix sound.
Yeah.
And it was like during Terror Bird, the last song I was playing, so it kind of like fit. And I basically I knew, because it had started to creep in on that song. I was like, oh fuck. And so at some point I didn't finish the song. I just closed my laptop and I was like still talking into the mic, and it was just slowly. And then I think there was a big beep, and that was it. I was like, oh, well, that's appropriate for the pandemic. And then I think in Belgium, there was one where that device I said that wasn't really working, like the handle, it was a 3D printed handle and it snapped off. And so I was sort of like trying to play it, but pushing down, and it was only like one song in, and I was the headliner, and I had to cancel the whole show, which was really depressing.
Yeah, because it's got to suck, because there's not really anything you can do. I mean, you can't bring a 3D printer with you to reprint something and like weld it together,
I try to bring an extra chip, like the circuit, like my microcontroller for my main drum controller, because that's the one that if like if my sound card goes, my computer goes, I can always buy another sound card. I probably missed the show. Like if something happened in sound check and like something's broken, like the way I see it is like, okay, well, it would just be one show. On Tool, I had a backup computer. I had a backup for almost everything. And I had a plan on stage that if something went wrong, we would A/B to a different setup. It would take like some downtime, but for the most part, I have backups. I have a soldering iron. I have wires. I have switches. I sort of have like a plan for how I can get through the show.
No, that makes sense. You got to plan for the worst and hope for the best.
I used to bring, but on these smaller tours, where there's 150 people, 200 people, you're not like, it's not the end of the world if you miss one show. People are used to it now with COVID, so they're trained.
Yeah, that's one good thing about COVID is that like, if a band has to cancel, people just understand now. It's like, okay, that you have COVID, you can't necessarily go out there and just give it to everybody.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, Tristan, let's talk about what we've got coming up. We've got the June tour dates in Europe, right? When does that kick off?
First date is June 7th in Liège, Belgium. And it kind of goes, there's 3 festivals in there. Mystic Festival, Gdansk, Poland, Full Force Festival in Germany somewhere, and then Rock in Berlin. And it's basically a trip through Scandinavia, which for me, that sort of loop through Germany, up through the Baltics, Scandinavia, back down through the Netherlands, tend to be sort of I would say probably the best, other than the UK, like the best loop for me in Europe. So we're trying to hit some of those markets again. That's for me, that's the part. Yeah, it's not my favorite part of Europe. I just think it's the one right now that's doing the best for me. So we're gonna hit it.
That's good. What anything else we can announce? Any potential new music or anything else?
Well, I do have. I did 3 collaborations, which I don't think I can mention any of them yet because none of them have been finished and actually. But I put a lot of work into them and involving me singing a little bit and doing some industrialifying some other people's music, which is rad. Like something in the more proggy area, another industrial, and then something in the synthwave world. And so that's fun for me. And I would say the gear is the biggest thing that'll be happening this year. There's a big collaboration happening, and also we will be releasing some gear to sell finally.
Excellent. It's all happening right here, right now.
Yep.
Or actually a little bit later, but still, it's all happening.
Yep. We're excited.
Well, Tristan, I want to thank you for taking the time to come on the show. I really dig what you're doing, as many do, so keep doing it.
Thank you very much, and it's been a pleasure chatting with you. It's a very chill afternoon for me.
And there you have it, Tristan Shone. Wow. Great conversation. Really interesting story. I got to see him for the first time. I think it was this year, late last year. I can't remember, but my good friend Doug, who plays guitar and sings in Ecstatic Vision, is the live guitarist for Author and Punisher now. He invited me to the gig, went and saw it, met Tristan. Really nice guy. Great performance, too. I mean, Tristan is one of a kind. If you've seen him live, if you see what he does live with those machines, there's nothing else like it. It's great stuff. And I remember that A Life Once Lost tour where they took Author and Punisher out. I was at the Brooklyn date. That was sometime in 2012. But I didn't know that was the first time Tristan did a full US with a band on a tour like that. And I love that it was with A Life Once Lost because those guys are friends of mine and several of them have been on the show. So that was cool. And I'm just happy that it's happening for Tristan. You know, he said he wanted to get covered in metal magazines and play these venues and play with these bands and get the coverage. And I'm glad it's happening. I mean, if not for him, then who? Because the guy is one of a kind. Look at what he's building. Look at what he's doing. So great conversation. Thank you for coming on the show, Tristan. All right, so how are we doing? I'm going to check in, and I'm going to do it quick because I don't feel good. I'm sick again. I have some kind of crazy sinus thing going on. I don't know if this is like a getting sick viral cold thing or if my sinuses are messed up. I don't know. If it happens again soon, I guess I'm going to go to an ear, nose, throat doctor, but I've been bedridden all day. My weekend is shot. And I'm not happy about it. But what I am happy about is that this happened right before the tour. Because if I got sick on tour, that's miserable, right? Who wants to do that? So I suspect I'll get over this before the tour kicks off. When am I leaving? I'm leaving this Thursday, and I'll be gone for like a week. So better now than on tour, right? So I'm sick. I'm not happy, but despite that, I pushed through and went to the Jerome's Dream gig last night at TVI in Brooklyn. I got there in time to see Elizabeth Color Wheel, who were fantastic. Never heard them before. Didn't see them before. Awesome. Jerome's Dream, first time seeing them. Wow. I was blown away. And it was a sold out show. The crowd was going off. I can't say enough nice things about it. So if you have the opportunity to see them on this run, I don't know how many dates are left, but go see them. You will not be disappointed. And the new album is great. My favorite of the year so far. So I'm glad I pushed through and went to that, despite not feeling good, because I got to meet Jeff for a minute outside after the gig from Jerome's Dream, and Eric from Jerome's Dream. I was talking to him for a minute. Really nice to meet those guys. They've both been on the show. Didn't get to say hi to Sean, but I was in a rush to get out of there because I really didn't feel good. And then I've been in bed all weekend with a stuffy head and I'm sneezing and it's miserable. It's miserable. But that's it. That's everything that's going on. I'm going to keep it short because I don't feel good. I'm back next week. I'm going to give you a hint about who's on the show next week. It's a hardcore band, and they've been in the news a ton because they just put out an excellent new record. Who could it be? I wonder. You're going to have to wait till next week to find out. And I'm back next week with a new episode and a new guest. So thanks everybody for listening. And until next time.